Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's word study. Today we're going to be talking about the master of disguise, aka Satan, whose name is Gadriel. Before I actually begin, I want to just say that there are some people out there who get irritated with what I'm doing and will post comments like, "Why are you talking all this Hebrew stuff? Don't you know you're addressing an English-speaking audience?" Or, "I was with you until you started speaking all those Hebrew words. Why can't you keep it simple and just speak English?" I'm going to let you in on something, my friends. Whenever someone posts something so obviously revealing about their absolute unwillingness to watch more than a few seconds of any one of my deliveries, especially the introductory video on my channel, which I post at the end of every video now, explaining what my channel is all about, I don't even consider the idea of responding. I don't give them a single thought, not for one moment. I just delete their comment, knowing that they rarely ever return, and if they do, and they display more of the same kind of satanic hatred for the things of Yahshua, YouTube has given me two wonderful tools. One is called the Block This Person button, and the other one's called the Ban This Person button. And I want you to know, I have no reservations about using these wonderful helps. They keep the wolves away from Elohim's sheep, and they keep all of our conversations beneath all my videos pleasant and full of light. But anyway, it made me think about how many people there are out there who actually think the Bible was written in English. People who say things like, "Jesus was a Christian, not a Jew." Or, "If you use any Bible other than the King James Version, you're going to hell." They're out there if you haven't seen them. Enter the master of disguise. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14 says, "It is no wonder, for Satan disguises himself as an angel of light." Satan's been hard at work these past 6,000 years, burying Yahweh's truth with so many different forms of masterful deceptions. It's astounding. Genesis, that's Bereshith, chapter 11, verse 1, reads, "The whole earth was of one language, Saphah, and of one mode of expression, Dabar." We're going to look at those words. But one very major way Satan has disguised the Father's truth is with language. The Father's word was originally given with his very own anointed language, Aramaic Hebrew. And I always say Aramaic Hebrew because no one can agree on which came first, Aramaic or Hebrew. But I believe Aramaic is older than Hebrew, and I also believe the ancient forms of each are so similar that it really doesn't matter. It becomes 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Further, all languages, including Aramaic and Hebrew at this point in time, have not only developed multiple variations, but have also become absolutely westernized in their dictionary word definitions, making it so that the Father's word has now been added to and taken away from beyond belief, except for the Father's most ancient pictographic letter forms, his original communication to us, and his blueprint for mankind, which is actually older than creation itself. That is the Odiote, which I've been presenting for the better part of a year or more now in my YouTube videos. And further, Satan has been all about distorting and changing names, the names of persons, places, and things. Philippians, that's Philippiim, chapter 2, verse 5, says, let the same attitude and mind be in you, which is in Mashiach, Yahshua. And that would be the Eastern mindset. With the Eastern mindset, Kadam, the way of the beginning, the mind of Yahshua, which we are supposed to have. That Eastern mindset considers a name to be more than just a name, as we think with the Western mindset. The Father's way is that a name represents the absolute nature of a person, place, or thing. And the way that Satan deceives everyone about the absolute nature of certain people, places, and or things in the Father's Kodesh word is to disguise them by changing the names. Let's start out with how Satan has used languages to deceive the world, and let's look at why I do what I do with these most ancient letter forms which I present to you every week. Odiot is the Aramaic Hebrew word meaning signs, and ot is a sign. And the odiot are the Father's signs. They are pictures, and they cannot be distorted or confused into abstract ideas. There are just 22 of them, and each one is a picture of Yahshua, a picture of Abba Father, and a picture of Elohim's plan for creation, salvation, from beginning to the end. Yahshua and Yahuwah are the Aleph and the Tau, the first and the last, or the first all the way through the last, all 22 signs of his alphabet. As a short example, you take the first ot, Aleph, which is a picture of an ox head, has to do with being yoked. The last ot is Tau. It's a sign or a monument. And if you take and you yoke the ox to the sign or the monument, the ox is going to plow in a straight line right to that end mark. And as you go through Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, the picture is painted of the Father's plan from beginning to the end. These letter forms of Elohim have been recorded, however, in 4 stages throughout time, 3 of those stages distorting or disguising his original pictures. The first and the most ancient are the pictographic forms which I always present in my videos here on YouTube. The oldest visible use of these were found on a stone boulder that dates back to around 1500 BC or earlier. However, the truth is, as I said before, these odiot go back to a time before creation itself. It's the Father's blueprint. Remember, the Father doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and that means his odiot do not change. But over time, his odiot have been changed and disguised by man, and there's no doubt in my mind that that was done through Satan's influence. For example, take a look here at the third ot called Gimel in the Father's original pictographic form. It's the picture of a foot. It looks like a foot. You can't get it abstract about it. It's a foot. It has to do with your walk, either towards the Father or away from him. And this original form of the Father's ot is known as ancient Semitic Hebrew. Now, look at the first change, or the first disguise that was made. Here is the same oat, gimel, shown as what is called the Middle Semitic Hebrew variation, also known as Paleo-Hebrew, which began around 600 BC, was used by the Hebrews, the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Arameans, among others, until around 100 BC. And look at what happened to Gimel. The foot, it's upside down. The foot is up in the air. It looks like this guy's on his back and is no longer able to walk at all. How can a foot even be seen or taught at this point? Now, there are those out there who like to say that this oat is a picture of a camel's head and neck. But that's man trying to rationalize. Gimel was never meant to represent a camel. Now, next we come to the late Semitic Hebrew. This version was developed by the Arameans in Babylon around 20 AD, and there's no foot to be seen at all anymore. Again, some like to rationalize and say it's the foot of a bird. But how is the foot of a bird ever going to make anyone consider their own walk with Elohim? Anyway, finally, we come to modern Hebrew used today. Again, Elohim's teaching is gone. Now, mind you, everything I show you about the Father's original pictographic letter forms is still taught today with the modern Hebrew alphabet letter forms as the true meanings of each of the 22 odiot letters in the Aramaic Hebrew alphabet. And by the way, it's alphabet, not alphabet. Alpha is Greek, Alpha, Omega. Aleph is Aramaic Hebrew, Aleph Tau, so it's the Aleph Bet. However, even though these pictographic meanings are taught with the modern Hebrew odiot, the application seems to be all but forgotten. People look to the modern abstract word definitions found in dictionaries and leave it at that, ignoring the wonderful truths revealed by the individual letter forms that originally comprised all the Aramaic Hebrew definitions that the Father gave of these letters, odiot. The changes have all been Satan's doing. And now, add all that to Satan's immense efforts getting everyone to move to a Western mindset, away from Elohim's Eastern mindset. And Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 now says, you are saved by grace through faith. Grace and faith. Abstract terms that can be defined in a myriad of ways, through a myriad of cultures and mindsets that have all been scattered around the world for thousands of years. Not so with the ancient pictographic letter forms. When we look at the individual odiot for what's being translated into English as grace and faith, instead, we see the concrete idea of the Father's original communication to us. We see that it is not grace, but rather pitching a tent with Elohim. And we see that it is not faith, but rather being washed by and growing in His Word. Just consider the difference. We are saved by grace through faith. We are saved by pitching a tent with Elohim, our tent, and Him pitching His tent with us, through us being washed by and growing in His Word. Doesn't that make it simple enough for a child to understand? Say that to a child and, ask him what it means. He'll tell you. But look at a young child and say, we're saved by grace through faith. Have him explain that. He'll just stare at you. For a complete study on this, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, you can click the link for my video about that. You'll see this picture at the end of this video, and you'll be able to click on it. Or also in the more info section beneath this video, you'll see a link. And if you haven't watched that one, I certainly encourage you to do so. Now, in Genesis, that's Bereshith, chapter 11, verse 1, we read, "The whole earth was of one language, Saphah, and the whole earth was of one mode of expression, Dabar." The whole earth was of one language. That word there for language is Saphah, and that's Strong's, H8193. As a side note, you may be familiar with, because I say it a lot, Lashon HaKodesh. That's the common Hebrew phrase, meaning dedicated language, or the holy language. However, Lashon is a word that references all the languages of the world, not the original language of Yahweh. For example, it can be seen in Esther chapter 1, verse 22. It's not only a reference to all the languages of the world, but as a literal reference to the tongue of a man or an animal, and also as a reference to a babbler, or to an evil speaker. And that tells us that any language other than the Father's original language, Saphah, is nothing but wicked babbling. Saphah is spelled Shin, Pei, He. Shin, picture of two front teeth, has to do with cutting and separating things. Pei, picture of a mouth, has to do with speaking and with praising. And of course, He, picture of a spiritual man, has to do with revelation and the fifth dimension of spirit. So, Saphah is saying that in the beginning, everyone on earth spoke the language of the Father, a language that separated everyone and made them absolutely dedicated to Elohim by a clean speech, which was of his spirit, not of man's flesh or tampering. The word also says that the whole world was also of one expression. Most English Bibles say one speech or one vocabulary, but the Father said the entire world was of one dabar. Now here we see Strong's H1697. Dabar is spelled Dalet, Beit, Resh. Dalet, picture of a door. Yahshua is the door. And Dalet talks about movement back and forth in and out of that door. Dalet speaks of the four dimensions of space and time. Beit, picture of a house, has to do with family. In this case, we're talking about Yahweh's family. And then Resh, picture of a man's head, has to do with headship, who your headship is, and your thoughts, what your thoughts are on. So, Dabar is saying that our verbal expression, when expressed as it was in the very beginning, is as a door that leads others into the house of Elohim and makes Yahweh their headship. So we can see how Satan has added to and taken away from the Father's word. And we can see how he has used languages, even the Aramaic Hebrew, to lead everyone into the west, Yam, away from the east, Kadam, into the darkness, away from the light. And for an in-depth study about that, you can click on the link at the end of this video, also seen in the More Info section beneath this video, titled East is East, West is West. And I explain the difference between Yam and Kadam in total detail. But now let's look at how the devil has played with names to lead everyone away from the east and into the west, away from the light into the darkness, away from the truth into the lie. First, he disguised the true nature of Abba Father himself by removing the Father's name from the lips of everyone on earth when the ineffable name doctrine was introduced around 200 BC, when anyone found speaking or writing the name of Yahweh would be put to death. Then, further, he had the Father's name removed from more than 7,000 places in the Father's Word and replaced it with descriptive titles like Adonai, meaning my master, and Elohim, which is a reference to the Father, his Son, and his Ruach, his Spirit. And then Satan later managed to replace those with blasphemous names like God, short for Gadriel, the name of Satan himself, and Lord, the English way of saying Baal, and Jehovah, which means Yahweh is chaos, ruin, destruction, and mischief, a way of saying that Yahweh is Satan. Further, with the Greek language, he disguised not only the name of Yahshua by changing it to actually Jesus, and in the English that became Jesus, but Jesus means Hail Zeus. But the names of all Yahweh's prophets and chosen ones were all changed, and all the places as well. Shaul became Paul, Kepha became Peter, Yaakov became James, and Mitzrayim became Egypt. And the Father's name was changed to Theos, which is a term that can refer to any god whatsoever. It's not his name. The Father's Kodesh appointments with mankind, his Moedim, became known as Jewish holidays or the feast days, not Yahweh's prophetic appointments with mankind. No, feast days, party time, or worse still, holidays that are only for the Jews. They don't have anything to do with us. Pesach, also known as Passover, became Easter. Instead of looking upon the sacrificial lamb of Yahweh, Satan got everyone to look at a bunny rabbit and the colored eggs of a chicken. Halloween, Satan teaches people to look at darkness and demonic personalities and to make it fun for children to dress up in costumes of idols and get lots of free candy. And there is nothing in his word about an All Saints' Day. That idea is of the world, not of Elohim. Christmas, celebrate the birth of the Messiah? He was born around September, not December. And nonetheless, the manger scene is mostly overshadowed by money and the things of the world, not the things of Yahweh's kingdom. With Christmas, Satan's getting everyone to enact a celebration of the death and resurrection of Tammuz, not the birth of Yahshua. Have you ever read Jeremiah? That's Yirmiyahu, chapter 10. Verses 2 through 4 reads, Thus says Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen nations. Easter, Christmas, Halloween. And be not dismayed at the signs of the Shamayim, though they are dismayed at them, for these customs and ordinances of the world are false, empty, and futile. Now, get this. Quote, it is but a tree which one cuts out of the forest to make for himself a god, the work of the hands of the craftsman with the axe or other tool, They deck this idol with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so it will not fall or move around. If that's not the description of a Christmas tree, going out to the forest, cutting down a tree, decking it with, things. And then we don't fasten it with nails and hammers anymore. We have Christmas tree stands, but, things change over time. At any rate, it's pretty clear. There are many who call themselves believers and rationalize their participation in these worldly rituals, some with much fervency and defensiveness, even anger at times. But when they participate in these practices of the world, are they esteeming Elohim? No. They're saying to him, "We do not accept your instructions, Father." Romaim, chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to the ways of this world, adapting yourself to its external, superficial customs, but be transformed by the entire renewal of your mind, a new set of ideals and a new attitude, so that you may prove for yourself what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of Elohim, the things which are good and acceptable and perfect in his sight for you." In short, Satan's wicked acts are not to be used as tools for ministering to unbelievers, as some would like to say. The world today is full of looking at what is evil and calling it good. Same-sex marriage is fast being legalized everywhere. Homosexuality is being promoted as something that someone is born with and cannot change, even by pastors and priests. Divorces are made to happen quickly and easily, no longer requiring any need for just cause. The justice system does not operate with truth or integrity. If the laws can be applied in any way to suit any need, then it is considered just. Children are taught that competing for the prize has nothing at all to do with their own efforts of bettering themselves. Every single child on both teams wins the same prize, win or lose, and that has flowered into the fact that careers are no longer built on talents or abilities. It's who you know, not what you know. And it is no longer the earning of a college education, but the purchase of a college degree, which has young people acting as if they are now owed their weekly paycheck, regardless of their performance or lack of it. Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 5, verse 20, reads, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." Woe to those? Why? Because they are those who have joined hands with the devil. They are those who worship the ways of the world. They are those who are rebelling against the way, the truth, and the light, the word of Yahweh. The Father's name is Yahweh. That is spelled Yod-He-Wah-He. Yod, picture of an arm and a hand, has to do with working, what you make, actions, what you do, worship. Hey, picture of a spiritual man, has to do with revelation and the fifth dimension of spirit, Ruach. And Wah, picture of a tent peg, pitch your tent with Elohim. And then Hey again, picture of a spiritual man having to do with revelation, fifth dimension of spirit, the Ruach. Yahweh's name means that he does his work through his Ruach, pitching his tent with you, expecting you to pitch your tent with him in Ruach, spirit, not in flesh. And you worship Elohim in the spirit by not worshiping him in the flesh. You know, my dad used to say to me, it's no wonder that the word refers to people as sheep. What do you mean, Dad? He says, you know, you have a flock of sheep, there's a lead sheep, and if that lead sheep jumps off a cliff, the whole herd will go off the cliff. Now, when he told me that, I was pretty young, and I was like, really? Is that so? Yes, that's so. And people are like sheep. They follow the crowd. The crowd's going off, they're heading this direction, they're going to go off a cliff. You're running alongside and say, you know, excuse me, but, you know, this is the wrong way. The Father's word says this is not the right way. If you go this way, you're going to go over a cliff and die. Oh, someone said to me this week, I don't believe everything the word says. And I replied and I said, you know, that's fine. You have absolute freedom to disobey the Father as much as you please. But, you know, you keep going that way, there's a cliff. You're going to go off the cliff and die. That's what the Father's word says. Oh, I don't believe what the Father's word says. Okay, see you. Wouldn't want to be you. But people do that. They just follow the crowd. They don't think for themselves. Well, all these sheep, they're all going to just go right off the cliff because the lead sheep went off the cliff. They don't think for themselves. So, that's our study this week, my friends, about the master of disguise. Satan presents himself as an angel of light. And if you don't look to the Father's word and learn to think for yourself, you'll just believe the lie. As always, I hope and I pray that this study is a berachah to you and yours. And Abba willing, I'll see you next week. Until then, shalom, my friends. Yeah. Now 2,000 years have gone by, it's another working day. Some would rather let it lie, but the question still remains.